Hey there. Welcome to the Memorial Day podcast for Owens Recovery Science. It's 2024, and this will be our first of two episodes. If you're listening right now, I've got a quick bio for you to tell you about our guest here. And then at the end of that bio, we'll do a moment of silence that you could, if you start this podcast at the right time, you could observe that moment of silence at 3 p.m., either local time for yourself or Eastern time, if you would like to perform it when we at Owens Recovery Science will perform it. If you're unfamiliar with our Memorial Day podcast, we depart from discussing BFR here. We depart from really discussing much on the medical side, on the rehab side of things. And what we do is we try to provide an opportunity for service members to tell their story because their story is important, but maybe a little bit more importantly, we want to tell the stories of some of their fallen brothers that died in combat. Because if you don't know the purpose of Memorial Day, that is the purpose. It's not Veterans Day. Memorial Day is about remembering service members who have died in combat. So it's almost kind of weird to call it a holiday for a service member. And I actually kind of feel strange now that I have a better understanding of what Memorial Day means to service members. It's almost even hard for me to say Happy Memorial Day because it's just like, it's not really all that happy um, to memorialize and remember these things that are really tough. At the same time, it can be happy. You can celebrate and really remember the good times with your friends. And in many ways, that's how people choose to look at it and honor it. And I get that. And actually, that's probably what I would do if I had lost a lot of friends in combat. Thankfully, I haven't, but I get this opportunity to listen to these stories, and doggone it, it's hard, but it's kind of the least I can do. So we're really happy with the two interviews we had this year. I think they came out great. I think you guys are going to really enjoy listening to these fellas talk about their experiences. And I'm going to shut up, read you a bio of our first guest, and then we'll do a moment of silence for the national moment of remembrance, is what it's called here in the U.S. So, our first guest here being interviewed by our very own Johnny Owens. And this is going to be confusing, y'all, but his name is also Johnny, but his name is Johnnie Yellock II. Johnny came from a dual veteran family. He enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in 2007 after he completed his engineering degree from Tarleton State University in Stephenville, Texas. Johnny was a USAF Special Operations Combat Controller and served 2 combat tours in the Middle East. He's going to describe to you what being a combat controller is all about. It's pretty cool to hear. And I learned some stuff that was very, very interesting. In 2011, on Johnny's second deployment to Afghanistan, an improvised IED struck his vehicle, injuring both of his legs. Johnny received the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and the Combat Action Medal for his actions that day. He spent the next 3 years in rehab and has endured 33 limb salvage surgeries to date, allowing him to keep both of his legs. During his recovery, Johnny found that physical pain paled in comparison to the mental, emotional, and social traumas that are all too present following such a course altering event, and couldn't have put himself back together alone. It was the dedication and love of his family and so many friends that ensured his recovery was successful. And so at this time, we'll do a little moment of silence and then we'll go right into the interview with Johnnie Yellock.
Owens Recovery Science Podcast.
All right, welcome back to a special edition of the Owens Recovery Science Podcast. This is our annual Memorial Day podcast that I'm always super honored and proud of. And today it's going to be badass because not only do we have a dude with an amazing name, Johnnie Yellock, but we also have a good friend of mine who we spent a lot of time together at the Center for the Intrepid. He's got an amazing story and he has had quite a career in the military. And also, we had a big 50th birthday bash in North Carolina with my buddy Joe Shue and Johnny and a bunch of our old colleagues. We were all up there together. Johnny crushed it on the ropes course. We had some artificial rapids we went through, and I was the wuss, and Johnny manned up as usual. So, anyways, my man Johnny, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Hey, I appreciate it, Johnny. Just a great name there. And that 50th birthday party, what was that, 10 years ago, 11 years ago?
Oh shit! Come on. Actually, yeah.
No, I appreciate the elevator pitch, but honestly, I'm beyond humbled and honored to share some of your time. Anybody that's seen this podcast with this guy right here, you should know that he came into so many of our lives at the absolute lowest point and was a pivotal point for change and growth and progress through a process that he crafted himself. So I owe all of my future success since the time when I was wounded in combat to you and a small cadre of guys that were down there, the Center for the Intrepid, whenever I was wounded. So thank you. And yeah, happy to just be having a chat with you today.
Yeah, man, you're awesome. Don't make me start crying at the very start of this thing. So
well, it leaves us nowhere to go.
Yeah, right. So Johnny, give us your background, where you grew up, why you chose the path you did, and explain kind of the high-end stuff you did. A lot of people don't know the
where I grew up and why I grew up. So both of my parents were military. Their parents were also military. My dad did 27 years. He was a chief in the Air Force. And my mom did 20 years as well in the Air Force. She was radio and broadcasting, television. Grew up seeing her on TV. So we moved around a little bit. I was born in the Netherlands. My sister was born in Germany. We lived in Iceland for a little while, but mostly grew up in your home there in San Antonio. So I've spent probably about half of my life in San Antonio. Love the city. And when my parents got out of the military, we moved up to Fort Worth, Texas, and finished high school. My senior year is when the towers were struck, and it was not in the cards for me to go immediately into service. I knew, I had two enlisted parents, and they wanted nothing more than for me to go and get the college taken care of first before making that decision. And 4 years later, after graduating an engineering degree from Tarleton State University, I walked across the stage and had that diploma, and it was as if I grabbed it from the dean and handed it right to my parents, because I recognized that it didn't have, the impact that you would hope on myself. It didn't make me proud. So I knew that I wanted to go and do something that I could be proud of myself for doing. And at that time in 2006, it was a pretty tumultuous war going on the other side of the planet. So I enlisted in the Air Force to be a somewhat unknown job, which is called combat control. The Air Force at the time has two special operations career fields, one being pararescue. They work obviously with rescue missions, and combat control, which focuses on joint fires behind enemy lines. So calling in airstrikes.
That's crazy, man. I didn't realize the whole college thing. So, man, you're even more of a stud than I realized, dude. So if I have engineering issues, I guess I'm not going to call you since you really didn't use that. So
I'll be sure to send you an updated resume.
Yeah, I need it. Can you go a little bit deeper in kind of what some of the roles were as a combat controller? Exactly
oh, yeah. I think we're slated for 2 hours for this podcast, so I'll start from the beginning. But combat control is an incredibly multifaceted role. our job on the battlefield is to be the air-to-ground liaison for the pilots overhead in enemy zones. So if you can imagine, as the combat controller being a special operator attached to a Navy SEAL team or an Army Special Forces team, we're detached, we're outside the wire. And if we engage with the enemy, it's my job to be able to relay the combat scheme of maneuver to an aircraft that might fly in the middle of a combat situation. So it's my job to remain calm, cool, and collected while engaging the enemy to relay that battle picture to the pilots to make them have that warm and fuzzy they need to drop bombs on the battlefield. So to get to that point, it's a 2-year-long attrition process called the pipeline, and we do a lot in the water. There's a lot of breath holds. They say the water is the ultimate equalizer. So it doesn't matter how much of a GI Joe cool guy you are. If you can't hold your breath for longer than you're willing to do so and accomplish a task that you've been set out to do, then you obviously can't handle the stressors of war. So we go to airborne school, survival school, air traffic control school. So we have the same FAA certifications that any air traffic controller on the planet has. And we need that because we're the only special operations component that can provide air traffic control in a combat zone. So while we're calling in for airstrikes, we're also deconflicting multiple levels of aircraft, whether that's UAVs or fixed wings, fighter jets, bombers, tankers, coordinating yo-yo operations of refueling. So there's a lot that goes into combat control, but ultimately what it is communication. So in the craziest of situations, being able to remain calm and deliver a message as succinctly as possible so that I can continue doing my job, knowing that the pilots can continue doing theirs.
It's awesome. You know, it's funny how a personality fits their position so well, because I don't know anyone more freaking detail oriented than you are. So I'm sure knowing every little detail is part of it. And someone who is as calm, cool, and collected, even, when I knew you were as frustrated as can be. And also, dude, you've always had the best attitude. I wish I could bottle whatever you are taking and take some of it myself, because you're just easygoing guy. And I'm sure when what's hitting the fan around you, that was huge.
Yeah, it's I would say that the military can definitely groom you into what a tool that they need you to be. But like I said, that pipeline of schools, 2 years of attrition, really focuses on finding the right personality that can not only do the job and handle all these different skill sets, but also have that emotional intelligence to be able to communicate with a multifaceted group of individuals on the battlefield, i.e. your teammates. So everyone knows the exploits of Army Rangers and special operations and Navy SEALs. They know these guys as alphas, right? The most bad A dudes on the battlefield. Well, put all those guys in a horrible situation, shake them up, blow them up, and we're expected to just get along, right? Eat MREs and sing Kumbaya. And, not only that, but these guys are operating together, they're training together, they deploy together. So these guys may be family already. They've been doing this for 10 years. And me as the Air Force guy, I'm one guy. So they're operating, they're in country, and then a combat controller leaves, I do a handover with him, and I replace him. Now it's my job to reassure the team that I've got my stuff together. I exactly what my capabilities are, where the limiting factors are, and I need to be able to get on with this cadre of people pretty quickly, because the next day we're going back out into the firefights.
Yeah, so that's awesome, man. Take us through, some of your deployments, and then all the way up to the time where led you to where we met.
Yes, sir. So after 2 years, I finally get to go on my first deployment, and that's in 2010. And I was I was slated to go to a certain portion of Afghanistan, and then a teammate of mine had a small injury, so I was the first replacement. So I had to replace him and do his mission, which was combat search and rescue. And so I was in northern Afghanistan, and my deployment was very tame, but what it did was bring the battlefield home for my parents, because two of my best friends were killed in combat. The individual who had the slight injury, whose position I needed to take, so we traded deployments. That's Danny Sanchez right here. He was killed in combat. And then 13 days later, my best friend, Mark Forrester, in the middle there, was also killed. My family, my parents back home, knew both of them, knew their families. I had spent Thanksgiving with the Forrester family just the year before deploying, and we'd gone through all of our training together. So incredible individuals. And so I'd come home from that first deployment after 6 months, and we have a 1-to-1 flow ratio. So we'll be in country 6 months, come home for 6, train up, get recertified on everything, and then redeploy. So 6 months later, I would go on my second deployment to northern Afghanistan, and this time was a ODA deployment. So I was attached to an Army Special Forces team, and our job at the time was village stability operations. So Army Special Forces in bed with indigenous forces to train and equip, provide all the logistics and training that they need to be able to support themselves and their countryside whenever America would pull out of the war. So we would load up on trucks and respond to skirmishes that would happen throughout the night. On the 7th day on the team, we were in a 3-vehicle convoy traveling south. This is in Paktika province. And we started to pick up ICOM chatter, internal communications between the enemy, that they could see us, they were counting our vehicles, and they were wondering if we were going to stop. We started to DF, or direction find, so navigate toward their radio transmissions, but couldn't find anything. We decided to get back onto our route. We started to go through a dried riverbed, or a wadi. The first vehicle went through and out the other side, set up a defensive position as our vehicle started to go through the wadi. Me as a combat controller, I've got 2 radios on my chest and a big one on my back to communicate with aircraft and satellites. I've got a moving map tool open in my lap, a laptop, where I'm tracking GPS positions and noting possible enemy locations should they pop up, so that if it does happen, I'm quickly able to relay coordinates to pilots that are going to be inbound. So as we started to go through that wadi, I'm in the bed of the truck. My interpreter is in the bed with me, seated in the back. I'm standing up and I've got my hands up on the turret. And as we start to come up and out the other side of the wadi, that's when the improvised explosive device detonated beneath the rear axle, right beneath my feet, disabling the vehicle. And when I opened my eyes, I had been flipped up onto the top of the turret. I could see nothing but orange haze. I could smell and taste nothing but chemical noxious smell and taste from the homemade explosives and all the diesel fuel that was pouring out of the truck. As I sat up, fixed my helmet, put my peltors or my headphones back on, and I looked down, I could see the bottoms of both of my feet looking back up at me, and I was losing blood into the cabin. My interpreter, Enzo, was unconscious on the floorboard. I grabbed my weapon, started scanning the village that we were skirting about 200 meters to the southeast, and then relayed to the team leader that I don't see any activity in the village. Enzo has a broken leg. That's my interpreter. I've got 2 broken legs, and I need a medic. And then that calm, cool, and collected bit that you talked about. I am proud of the priority of work that I did there, and that's a testament to incredible training. But yeah, that last part where I said I need a medic, I definitely got more animated at that point. And the medic would start to make his way over to our position. Again, it's now a active combat zone, and there's an IED that's gone off. So it takes time to clear that distance. You had to bring the dog out to sniff to get the medic to our position. So As we're waiting, I elevated my legs, so grabbed my legs and placed them on the ammo cans beside me as Enzo was coming back to. And then we would spend about an hour patching me up, taking my boots off, putting on tourniquets. I had to put on 2 tourniquets, and the medic put on a third. Both my legs, I continued to lose blood, and was, I'd say about 30 minutes in. Again, I was calm at this point. About 30 minutes in, the medic said, "Hey, do you want morphine?" Like, what? Why was that? Why was that not on offer in the beginning of this ordeal?
Yeah.
Now that I'm all tourniqueted up and adrenaline is pumping, I'm cool. But sure, yeah, let's get some morphine going.
Let's go ahead. I'll take it if you give
Yeah,
it.
yeah. If there's a debrief after this, just remember they offer the comforting drugs at the
Early
beginning.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. So about an hour later, we're medevac. They load me and Enzo up. I was the worst case from the incident. No one inside the vehicle. There was no follow-on firefight, so everybody else got out of there safely. And then myself and Enzo would start a 7-day long process back to the States. And then
How long were you bleeding out? I mean, that was a story we heard so much, of like, I know we lost a lot of guys that, who just bled out and couldn't get that bleed to stop.
right. And in 2011, that was boomtown in Afghanistan, middle of 2011, especially. So air tasking matters, right? How a team leader or how a medic delivers what's called a 9-line, or the information that triages the incident on the battlefield. So if you can imagine at the operations center where the air is being dispatched from, they're getting requests for air support and medevacs from all over the place. And if you don't deliver the information properly, then you're not going to be tasked properly. So I never stopped losing blood. But fortunately, by the time I'd made it to Sharana Air Base, only then did I finally pass out before they gave me blood transfusions and brought me back. But I was conscious and coherent and enjoyed the ride all the way. I remember my teams would still say that I was barking orders the whole time, telling people what to do. And
I imagine.
yeah.
But it's kind of wild. We worked with some of the scientists across the street at the ISR who were the big tourniquet guys. And, they were saying the amount of blood loss to mortality is so different for everyone. It's almost like individually based. And some guys, it's just like, you wouldn't think it would have been enough for them to actually pass. And if you lose that much and you're still lucid, it's pretty nuts.
That is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get you, once you went to the air base, did you move on to launch stool after that?
Yes. So was medevac directly to Sharana, was put into a drug-induced coma so they could do the first battery of surgeries and stabilize my legs. And then overnight they would move myself and Enzo to Bagram. And then the next morning we would be flown to launch stool where I spent 4 nights there, and then 1 night in Walter Reed before flying to Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio, and where my dad, who was again prior chief in the Air Force, was the first to walk up the ramp of a C-130 on the runway and kneel down beside me to welcome me home. So that was pretty amazing. Awesome. But yeah, he had some clout to get out there on the runway. So yeah, that would start a 3-month inpatient process at BAMC. And by the time I was discharged from BAMC,
describe what your injuries were exactly, because man, it was devastating injuries. You described it the way you saw them, and that was really at the worst. And then when I saw it, when they were pretty fixed, it was still like, oof, this is bad, man.
Right. Well, you have seen your share of trauma, that's for sure. And this was my first, right? Looking down and seeing mine was really actually the first time I'd ever been wounded or injured, any serious injury in my life. And the military doesn't prepare you for that. This is not a knock on the military. We are prepared to die. We're prepared to sacrifice for what we believe in and for our teammates, but nobody considers coming home in a different state. No one thinks like that. And the military, to their credit, you can't spend too much of your time convincing people that they could come home mangled and different, right? You need them to be focused on the mission and focused on getting things done, right?
Yeah.
And should something happen like what happened to me, just know that the military does have your back. And I was fortunate to wind up in your clinic to get the care. So my injuries were bilateral open fractures to my tibia, fibula, calcaneus. My heels were turned to dust. My talus, which is my ankle bone in my right foot, was ejected from my right foot, and I have it in a little jar in my office because I didn't want to leave any bit of me in Afghanistan. So when my team was cleaning up the truck, they took that nugget and stuck it inside an MRE bag and wrapped it with a rubber band. And my commander handed it to me at my retirement ceremony. He was like, "Take this nasty thing away from me."
Get it out of
Yeah. So, but those are my injuries, and the process of winding up in your office is limb salvage. So, because of the war and because it was boomtown, the medical field saw so many iterations of similar injuries, right? And the process that you and two other people, my surgeon and my prosthetist, were involved in was limb salvage and return to run. So, limb salvage, just trying to do everything possible before amputation, right? Give guys as much of a shot as possible at finding a new normal and potentially even getting back to the battlefield on legs that would have in the past been discarded in the battlefield. So, now, almost 13 years on, I'm blessed to say that I have had 33 surgeries on both of my legs. The end state is I have complete hindfoot fusions. So I tell people I've had 33 surgeries to replace a K with a G. I no longer have ankles, I have angles, but I wear these leg braces, which if I'm wearing pants, nobody would have any idea that there's anything wrong with me. I'm still able to skydive. I can still run out of a burning building if I needed to. But for the most part, I'm going to walk the rest of my life, and I'm cool with that. Believe me, I did plenty of running in my younger years, and running sucks. So most of y'all out there do it wrong anyways, and you're going to regret it in your latter years. So I'll slow down a little bit physically, but the braces give me the ability to do and accomplish so many things, and that would not be possible if it weren't for your blood, sweat, and tears, Mr. Owens, again, at the lowest part of so many of our lives. So thanks again for being a part of that team and leading that initiative.
I appreciate it much. And I think going through years before your injury with so many guys and before this IDEO device and return to run, I'm not sure if you would still have your both legs, which is crazy thing to think about. Because, Joe Shu, you're the surgeon, and we would always meet and go over all the cases and keep going. And man, your calcaneus fractures were so complicated. It was basically like from the top of the Empire State Building, dropping a bowling ball onto the ground and trying to pick up all those pieces and somehow put all that back together, which is like next to impossible. And it's not even just the bone part. I mean, you lose what's called the fat pad under it. And most people, if they lose that fat pad, they're done. They're like, nope, I don't need this leg anymore. And so for you to have that bilaterally and then just throw in 2 open tibias, which is also crazy. Yeah, man, you were one of those cases where if you said cut these bad boys off, we would have been like, I totally get it, brother.
Yeah.
Totally get it. And so I kind of want to touch base on this because, we talked about the program at the Center for the Intrepid on previous podcasts, but basically you guys would come in once you're able to start to be able to do more and start ambulating. We would get this IDEO device that Ryan Blanc really was the pioneer of developing, custom built around you. And then it was a weeks and months and years long process to be able to learn to use these devices. I've got video of you running in them and doing all sorts of ooh-ah things. But you guys were so important to help the guys coming in, because there was always a new one coming in. And, I've got Johnnie Yellock, who, carried so much respect, not only as a combat controller, but just who you were. And I almost feel like you guys were more important in keeping these youngins coming in engaged and being able to salvage their limbs and keep them. I mean, y'all kept so many people from going to amputation, which I'm sure a lot of them are really appreciative of at this point in their life. So throwing it back at you, man.
No, that's
having you as part of my program, and I kept you around forever, every day. you were basically out there running it with Big Joe, my assistant, half the time. So.
No, I appreciate it. It is an honor, like I said, to have made it this far. Unfortunately, a lot of my peers that have gone down this road have gotten to that point where they elect to amputate. But even giving guys the ability to elect it at a better time, right, when their head is more clear, it's a family decision, it's a life decision, as opposed to these 19-year-olds that just came off the battlefield. They're right. They don't have that spatial awareness of the second, third, and fourth order effects of things. And we're swimming in narcotics at the time, right? Guys get discharged from the hospital. Again, not a knock on the military or healthcare system, but we were in a lot of pain. This was immense trauma and unbelievable, but that becomes normal, right? We are driven to succeed, right? So as soon as I could be an outpatient and go to the Center for the Intrepid right across the street, all I want to do is start making progress. And very quickly you realize that you can only make progress if you, if you're not hindered by immense crushing pain. So you're kind of in this cycle where you don't want to take the drugs, but you need to take the drugs for a time so that you can make the progress you need. And that's what I did at the Center for the Intrepid for, almost 2 years. I was also proud of myself for getting off of all those drugs as quick as possible and enduring plenty of pain. I always tell people and motivate people when I speak that, it's so much better to feel pain fleeting your body than it is to numb the pain that is affecting you in the moment, right? It feels so much better to know that it's getting better. And you're not going to feel that if you continually take the drugs. So stop taking the drugs, right, for longer and longer iterations so that you can actually feel yourself improving. I might be a little bit extreme to that because I got to the point where I wouldn't even take any medication post-op. So there are plenty of surgeries that I've had where I wake up and I don't want any drugs. And I might be a little extreme.
Well, no, that's perfectly said, man. And we also know that there was some guys that, man, they were swimming in it, and we lost quite a few guys to the drugs, actually, during my time there. So, I mean, that was a huge thing. And again, so many of these guys didn't want to hear it from me because I hadn't gone through it. But when you guys are telling them this, that was the game changer.
Well, there was, the silver lining to, like I said, Boomtown in 2011 when we were there, was that it was Boomtown. There were so many guys in so similar situations that it was easy to look at like the senior class, right, as a freshman just showing up, to look at guys that were actually going back to the battlefield. You got Ryan that is doing everything
he can't not
can
go.
to get back
Yeah.
to the battlefield. And I'm just trying to get off this blue medicine ball and stand for the first time. And I'm like, dang, if that's possible, then, I've got work to do. So, we held each other accountable. We motivated each other, even though I don't know most of the guys' names that were there at the time. We were observing what was going on, and it was all positive. It was all progress, and it was all intentional because of guys like you smiling and showing up early and staying late every single day to create a space where we could improve.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it was crazy times. I saw a video. I found an old laptop, and it was one of our days. We're all out there training on the sport court, and I think there was it looks like over 50 something guys. It almost looks like the same injuries. We got the Johnnie Yellock, who's like, "Screw you guys, I got two bitches."
Right,
Everyone else running
right.
around, but yeah,
That's how
yeah,
it is now. So Center for the Intrepid is still there, still doing great work. And, when I got out of the military, I wanted to live in Austin, Texas, which is less than an hour away, because I didn't want to be too far away from the nest. And a lot of guys that have been through the process, like Dan Carlton, a lot of guys, they want to stay close so that they can get that care with their prosthetics or with their IDEOs and still see the same people. It makes total sense. I have since moved further, so I'm 5 hours in Dallas, and it's a little bit more to do to get down there, but it is just like coming home every time. Some of the faces are different, but that we're still doing incredible stuff there. And it's phenomenal. But yeah, I walk by that same sport court and I'll see like 3 dudes out there, and it just, not a knock on them, but I'm like, man, I went through and it was hard.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and thank God there's only 3 guys now, right? I mean,
That's a great thing. Hey, it's a strange community that we're bragging on, like,
yeah,
how much pain I've been through, how many surgeries, how many
yeah,
amputations, how many different prosthetic legs do you have, right? It's the podcasts that you're doing, the conversations that you're having, they'll give people an insight into just a completely different world, right? That's the beauty of doing this and having conversation, is gaining a perspective that you would otherwise have no insight into. Even just the idea. And oh, by the way, I have my 34th surgery with Dr. Shu scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Even just the idea of potentially having to have an amputation one day is not a scary one. It's not a looming process in my life. I know that if that day comes where I have to make the decision to amputate one or the other, that I'm going to be okay. I've seen so many guys and girls just crush it, absolutely crush it. And the number one key differentiator is attitude. So just do the best you can for as long as you can. If it becomes a hindrance to progress, then you might have to make a different decision, but you're going to be okay regardless.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Going through this process, it's what it's done mentally for you is, I'm sure, amazing. It's kind of interesting going back to, no one prepares you. I always say, like, once you have this kind of big boom trauma, your life's forever going to be different, and you guys can't be prepared. But I can't remember which commander or general, someone came through, former Vietnam guy, and he said something like that, these guys aren't prepared for this life-changing event. So the best we can do is show them that they're going to get the most badass care of their life once it happens. And so you guys, every day, that's your job, is to let them know, even when they're downrange, they're like, man, if I get hurt, I'm going to get down to Center for the Intrepid, and I've heard they're going to really take care of me. So that was also a huge motivator for me every day.
Absolutely.
Man, sometimes it was tough. When you see our 50th birthday party, we've got you guys all there. You guys became like family, and going through some of those, worked so hard, or divorce, or I'm cutting his leg off, I'm letting you down, Johnny. I'm like, you're not letting me down, I get it, man. So
some guys
everything
feel bad, about electing amputation.
I know.
These are very
Yeah.
individual stories. Everybody has a different road to take, and you shouldn't be ashamed of making the decision. And again, if it's at the end of the culmination of a limb salvage battle, you've had thousands of opportunities to elect amputation. So if it finally comes to that
Right.
point, you'll, don't feel bad.
You did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you did the
yeah.
right thing.
So we like to honor our fallen brothers for Memorial Day here. You've already touched on two. Phil, if you'd like to go deeper into their stories or any other stories, this is always
So
an amazing part.
yeah, so I'm blessed. I enjoy speaking and sharing my story. Um, People will be quick to label us wounded warriors as heroes, but we know it's Memorial Day weekend that the true heroes for all of us are the ones that pay the ultimate sacrifice. Ones like Danny Sanchez, Mark Forrester, and Forrest Sibley, um, and too many others. Um, and this weekend is a great chance um, to go out to an event, right? To do something. There's so many Memorial Day events. Go out to an event and just bend the ear of somebody. Have a conversation with somebody that did something that you've never done, and listen to them and give them the opportunity to speak the name of somebody that they may know. I went to a Carry the Load event this past weekend, and what's remarkable about that is we recognize as service members that we're less than 1% of everybody in America that serves, right? But if I'm in a room giving a speech and I ask, the service members to stand up, odds are it's a veteran event, so there's going to be a lot anyways. But my point is that I'll then ask if a family member of yours has ever served, stand up. If a best friend of yours has ever served, stand up. You go 3 layers, it touches everybody. It touches everybody. But what's most impactful is when I'll go across the room and I'll have people yell out the name, first and last name of somebody that's paid the ultimate sacrifice for this country. And to know that that person will never die a second death is incredibly humbling. The second death is when we fail to continue to speak their names, right?
Yeah, that's
So
yeah.
it's, I don't have it on right now, but I normally wear a bracelet that has 4 of my best friends that were killed in combat on it. People ask about it all the time. And when I tell them it's a memorial bracelet with the names of my friends that were killed in combat, they shy away and they're like, oh man, I'm sorry. No, I'm wearing this because I want you to ask. I want you to ask so that I have to have a platform to speak about them, about how incredible they were. These are all incredible individuals. 2 of them on their first deployment, 1 of them on their second deployment. And none of them were married. None of them had kids. They were young and the tip of the spear, and all they cared about was advancing freedom, defending freedom for everybody here at home. And they paid the ultimate sacrifice, and they would do it again if given the chance. I'm incredibly proud to be in their midst, to have the perspective and the stories that I will forever carry and share with them. For 11 years straight, I had a tradition of spending every Thanksgiving with Mark Forrester's family. And because, like I said, I spent Thanksgiving the year before he was killed with his family. And ever since, I carried on that tradition. I would travel to Alabama, oftentimes with my family or alone, and their family became my family. So pretty common story for Gold Star families to lose one and gain hundreds of people that will forever be checking in on them, asking them how they're doing, and giving them the opportunity to know that we're not forgetting, we'll never forget. We're going to keep their memory alive, and they didn't die for nothing. They died for this country, and we're going to keep on resounding their names so that more and more people know about it. This weekend, I'm traveling to Colorado Springs with a Gold Star family. Their son was Mark Weber. He was killed in Iraq in 2018. And I only know about them because his family lives in a house 2 miles away from here, from where I live in Fort Worth. And I would have never known them had he not been killed in combat. But when I heard that a pararescueman in the Air Force had gone down and saw that his family was there, again, this was 6 years ago, his father married me and my wife 2 years ago.
Wow,
His father
awesome.
and mother led me and my wife's premarital counseling. His father, Ron Weber, is my Bible study leader, right? So Mark Weber's sacrifice wasn't for nothing. It brought me into their lives, my wife into their lives, hundreds of people in this community and neighborhood would show out and show up for that family if they should ever need anything. So they lose one, but they gain hundreds. And again, we'll never let them forget. This weekend, we're traveling to Colorado Springs together with them to hike the incline of Manitou Springs, which is something that we did last year as well. And in keeping tradition, last year I did a 28-mile ruck march for Mark Forrester in Alabama. And then the next week, I hiked the incline with the Weber family. And then the next week, I flew to Charlotte with Dr. Shu to have my 33rd leg surgery on both legs and would spend the next 3 months in a wheelchair. So I wanted to check all those physical things off the box before I knew I was going to be back in a wheelchair. But even that, right? I'm in a wheelchair. All right, what can I do? I started playing wheelchair basketball again, and it was freaking
Trained
incredible.
you well, man.
It was freaking incredible again. So now I did a carry the load event last week. It was only 6 miles. This weekend, I'm going back to Manitou Springs for the incline. And then the following week, I'm going back to see Dr. Shu for surgery number 34. Simple, just to remove some hardware that's starting to poke out. So basically, I'm walking on, you talk about losing that fatty tissue underneath your heel. Well, I'm walking on a nail that's poking out. So we're going to take that out, and then I'll be good to go. And people always ask
doing
too.
These events.
People always ask. They're like, "Is this your last surgery?" Yes, until the next one. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Joe has a revolving door up there in North Carolina. That's for sure. Like, he's always texting me like, "Guess who's here today?" So yeah. But, it's always going to be a process, but damn, you mofo, you're making me feel like a lazy old man. I did a little 2 mile like hike, run earlier, and I'm done. Yeah.
Nobody that knows you is going to believe that. You're so busy. I doubt you've gotten more than 4 hours of sleep in 2 decades.
Yeah, well, you get used to it. You get used to it.
That's exactly right. But you're traveling.
You're great.
You're doing a lot of good.
You're a great ambassador, man. Yeah, well, you're an amazing ambassador. And any specific associations that you really, I think people would hear this and like, well, where could I give, or is there anything I should, kind of check out? I know you do a lot with Gold Star, but anything else?
Yeah. So as a combat controller, selfishly, I've got to plug the Combat Control Foundation. The SEALs have their foundation, Green Berets have a foundation. So Combat Control Foundation. And the CARE Coalition, but the one I normally talk about is Special Operations Warrior Foundation, SOWF, and they cover down on families of the fallen with a lot of education support. Another organization that does incredible work is Folds of Honor. So these are that's a large organization. But unlike a lot of the large or bigger veteran nonprofits, they are still so keenly focused on their mission of covering down with education support for the fallen. It's remarkable what Folds of Honor has been able to do. So Combat Control Foundation,
That's awesome.
Special Operations Warrior Foundation, and Folds of Honor.
People check those out. I mean, I think everyone just thinks, oh, the government is taking care of you. It is, man, it is not true. And even medical things, we're talking prior to this podcast, you might have to get some help just to get some medical things taken care of. And
Right.
that's just kind of ridiculous, but
And
it's a true thing.
That's another part of us being us, typically men being men, but that it is not just a man thing. It's a societal thing. It's a cultural thing. And that's the fact that no one is willing to raise their hand and say, I have a problem or I need help.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And if we could just break through that stigma, we could solve so many challenges that we're feeling in our world today. We just recognize that we're all going through it and that we're meant to. It's not supposed to be Skittles and rainbows every day. If it was, we would take it for granted. We need hardship in our life to recognize the triumphs for what they are. So if you're in a hardship right now, focus on that triumph, focus on somebody else. That's what I've always done. Don't look inward, look outward. People always ask, why have you always had such a great attitude? Were you ever down whenever you were wounded? And I tell people that it was never a why me mentality. It's always about what's next. So don't get so down on yourself. Just focus on what you can do today and what you should do tomorrow.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's heartbreaking that of what we're still seeing to this point. Ryan Keough, last year discussed, we lost a legend, Joe Cap, someone who none of us would have thought needed that help. And damn it, man. I hope this somehow slows down. I'm afraid it won't, but those are great words, dude. Only time I ever saw you down was I said, Johnny, today's sprint day. Let's go, brother. It's Wednesday sprint day.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm out on that.
Yeah. Well,
I can do it now.
Thanks so much. Yeah, well, you can do everything now, apparently. Once you got away from me, now you're like crushing the world.
That's exactly right. I appreciate it, sir.
I want to put the plug in too. You're got a new baby in that house, so congrats.
Oh yeah.
I didn't get a name or anything. It was just the picture. Oh, girl dad. Yeah, well,
girl dad.
Good.
Gotta
just
give
wait,
a shout
man.
out
About 15
to the wife.
or 16 years. You'll be going through my hell.
Yeah.
In about 15 or 16 years, you'll be going through my hell.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting off to a late start, but I've got a young and vibrant wife, so we're hoping to get 3 under 5. So we're, pray for us.
Man.
If you have some surplus after donating to those nonprofits I mentioned, feel free to send it our way, because I'm sure we'll need help with the diapers and all the whatnots. But
yeah, for sure.
But thank you for the time, sir. Good to reconnect.
Yeah.
And let's not wait till your 60th.
I'll see you at I was gonna say the 60th. We'll do another one, but let's get together. You're in San Antonio, man. Hit me up whenever you come around.
I will. Thanks, brother.
All right. Appreciate you, brother. Happy Memorial Day. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Have a good Memorial Day.